Hi.
Hello, look at you, podcasting
Yeah.
101,
If
totally set
I
up,
know if
microphone. Look at that. Wow.
if we're recording video, I'll move it a little off
Yeah,
camera.
it looks cool. It looks like very professional. And like
It,
I
oh
feel really
yeah.
I feel really lame by comparison.
This is what you get for 7 years of film school, undergrad and grad.
I don't know why, but I like the idea of like when people click on the podcast, they're like a little confused at first and they think, "Oh my, did I just get thrown into a Zoom call that I didn't know what I was part of?" Or I don't know. Maybe it's just the trickster in me who wants to create a little disorientation so you don't actually know what to expect. There's a dog wandering around behind me. Hi, I'm Dave Gray, founder of the School of the Possible, where we're exploring a new approach to learning. Most schools focus on teaching existing facts. In the School of the Possible, we focus on possible facts. Things that do not yet exist, but could be so. The school is about creating the future, but it is rooted in the present. No matter who you are or where you are, there is a best next step for you. A step that you can take. A step toward a better, more fulfilling, more meaningful life and work. A step toward a better world. That's the art of the possible, the art of the best next step. And it starts now. Welcome to the Art of the Possible. I'm your host, Dave Gray, and my guest today is Donna Lichaw. She is the author of a couple of really amazing books, The User's Journey and The Leader's Journey. She hates writing, which she has confided in me, but somehow managed to create a couple of really incredible and really useful books. She is also a very highly sought after executive coach. You would be lucky to have her on your calendar. I think it's pretty hard to actually get her on your calendar. In fact, I can testify to the fact that it's hard to get her on your calendar because it took quite a while for us to get in the same Zoom call. So, welcome, Donna. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Dave. And what an honor to hear all that from you because you're an author and just a genuinely amazing human who I've been inspired by. So glad I could do the same for you.
That is so mutual. So, the podcast is called The Art of the Possible. I see you as a possibilitarian in the sense that you've been very successful in creating possibilities for yourself and your clients, and you have created the world to some degree that you want to live in. Am I right?
I
You're in
have.
the process of
And
creating that world all the time, aren't you?
I'm always in the process. And again, I appreciate this because I think anyone who knows me will also have another opinion of me, which is, God, she is so cynical and so negative. And so it's fascinating
I
to
guess
hear
I've never seen that part of you.
the other part reflected back to me, which is, all right, I did create my life, my business, my career. And yeah, I do it because I do think these things are possible.
I will say from the outside, just knowing you a little bit, it almost seems effortless. Like what you do, it has a certain appearance of just being like just so natural and effortless. And you just have customers like do you, yeah, maybe I'll write a book. I guess I'll write a book. Yeah, it just feels like you're just flowing. How does it feel like from the inside? You said your friends see you as cynical. I'm surprised to hear that.
They only sometimes. It,
Okay.
it depends on how much it shows through. But yeah, it's a facade. It's all a facade. And it's funny that you see success from your angle as effortless because right now I coach a lot of high achieving, successful people,
Yeah.
founders, CEOs, executive teams, co-founders, brilliant visionary leaders who are making a huge impact in the world. And they've got the same thing going on, which is on the outside. Success seems effortless and they're so successful
Mm.
and everything's amazing. And on the inside, man, it's a lot of work and a lot of, I don't want to say stress. It's a lot of work. It's not, it's an adventure. Let me put it that way. It's an adventure and it's one that I love being on. And like all adventures, there are amazing parts and there are trials that you go through and it takes a lot of work and you can't do it alone. Yeah, it's a facade. And I'm glad you bring this up right away because
You talk a lot of in your book, I've in your books, you talk about superpowers and finding your superpowers, and the whole idea of life being a journey is to me one that's very fun and exciting. And I like that you say the word adventure, because adventures are fun, but they can also have dangers and risks and hazards. In fact, if you're guaranteed success, you're almost guaranteed not to be on an adventure.
yeah, if it's too easy, it's not challenging enough. It's
Yeah,
not what you could be doing. It's not that life and the things that we create and put into the world should be so difficult that they run us into the ground and burn us out, which is a problem that I have often and all my clients run into often when we start working together. They're severely burnt out. But if it's so easy, it's not as exciting. I like to think of it almost like oh, of course. And now I'm on a podcast and I have to say this name out loud and I'm gonna pronounce it properly, which is Michaela
I
Csikszentmihalyi. There's
yeah,
something like that.
flow
Um,
guy.
Flow
Yes.
guy. He wrote this and he studied flow for years, this
Wait,
amazing book on flow. Not, I don't think we need to be in flow all the time, but life, when we think of it like an adventure, it should be just challenging enough that it engages us
yeah,
and have enough wins and successes that also it engages us. Otherwise, what's the point? We have to be here
yeah.
for a reason.
Talk to me a little bit about when I use the phrase the art of the possible. What does that mean to you? If I were to say, I consider you a possibilitarian, I consider you someone who practices the art and science of the possible. What's your palette? What's your canvas? How do you go about it?
I
What's your toolkit? You could use whatever metaphor you like.
Yeah, here's what it is. It's just joking a minute ago about being a cynic and having friends and family often say, "God, you're so negative." And when I veer towards that, and the irony though is that my toolkit, my my main, it's my canvas and my brush for everything I've created in my life and what I help my clients do now is ironically optimism.
Hmm.
And it's this, I was going to say ability, but it's one that I've had to also hone and practice and refine and remember to use daily and every second of every day. But I believe that we're all doing the best we can with what we have available. When things are not great, we're doing the best we can with what we have
Hmm.
available. And when we can see what's possible and what we can create in our lives and in the world, because I work in a business context, so it's really
Yeah,
in the world we're creating things. I think anything's possible until you've been proven wrong. And then you adjust and course correct and then figure out what is possible. But I believe anything is possible, especially making an impact on the world, which is now what I help my clients do.
what's really interesting when you say we're all doing the best we can with what we have available. And I think that part of what makes someone a possibilitarian or a practitioner of this art is they're able to either see or create more available than other people can see or create. That you can create or imagine more choices by paying closer attention to what's around you because everything has inherently has affordances and possibilities.
Yeah. So here's an example. I work with a lot of, on the outside, a lot of difficult founders, people who have created a company, hit product market fit because they were onto something, and then eventually grew their company to hire fancy executive team, employees, and
I resemble that remark.
oh yeah, so I'm sure you I'm sure this will sound familiar, which is you've got something that got you there. So you've got vision, you've got grit, you have this ability to create what was people thought was impossible. And okay, all right, I'll start back
Typical
up again.
founders.
So you've gotten to the point where you've created this thing that people love, and suddenly you realize you're the boss too. And you have to learn how to manage people. You have to learn how to get along with people, not just be this brilliant visionary creative, but also align everyone towards that vision and communicate that vision over and over again and become not just friends, but have great relationships with people on your team, contrarian enough, but also congenial enough. It needs to, all these things need to come together. And often it's extremely difficult to make it come together. And what happens on the inside is that facade of success that we were just talking about, where, all right, success seems effortless to people. Everyone thinks you're so put together and successful. And on the inside, it's a struggle. It's harder than you thought it would be. You're not sleeping. Your team is not listening to you. Growth is probably, business growth is probably good, but your team's not performing as well as you want them to. And so it's starting to impede business growth. And when this happens, what I find is I'm often called in from one of two angles, which is one, a CEO will come to me and say, hey, my whole team, this new fancy executive team that I recruited from Silicon Valley to join me, and I thought they would be superstars, they are not living up to expectations. I think I hired the wrong people and they're not doing anything I tell them to do. And this person, or sometimes it's co-founders, they've just lost faith. If it's co-founders, often they've lost faith in each other. If it's one founder, they've lost faith in this team that they've created and they're frustrated. On the flip side, I often get called in by teams or advisors or investors who are saying, hey, we have this brilliant, amazing founder. They are the CEO. I think they can do this, but the team has lost faith in them. They are changing their mind all the time. They're micromanaging. They're overworking everyone, and it's holding the business back, and something's got to change. But when I think of what's possible and why I love working with founders, CEOs, and or teams that otherwise seem like they're really difficult, is a lot of people have lost faith in other people. When things aren't working out, you think, wow, they're not dedicated, or they don't know how to manage, or they should not be CEO. And that all might be true. And it's usually not true. But when you can come in and have this optimistic stance and really believe, okay, people are doing the best they can with what they have available to them, and you can increase what's available to them, whether it be tools, awareness, things to try and do, or likely all the above. What I find is 9 out of 10, anything is possible. And it's really neat to be a part of. And it feels hippy dippy sometimes to say, but this is part of why I love chatting with you. But anything is possible if you set your mind to it and you want to do it. Sometimes, sure,
So,
it doesn't work out, but usually it can absolutely work out.
Okay, so can I take you back to, do you remember your first customer? I
Yes.
guess your first customer in a way is your boss, but when you first went out on your own, can you put yourself back in that position where I don't know if you had a job, I don't know what happened before you were doing what you're doing now, but I'm guessing you had a jobby job, could have been anything, right?
Was consulting. I was doing product strategy consulting
Okay.
before executive coaching. And so I can think of my first coaching client,
So
my
you had
first
another
ever
you
client.
were
Ooh.
doing you were an independent consultant or what?
Yeah, so I was an independent consultant for
Okay.
several years doing product strategy. And the reason why I got into executive coaching is I was working with more and more successful companies and coming in and working with more and more folks in higher and higher up senior leadership at these companies. And they would bring me in to help with product problems and what they considered product leadership, like they wanted their teams to be better product leaders across their companies. And when I would come in, they didn't have product problems. And
Hmm.
people would tell me over and over again, our products are fine. Like, why are you here? I'm fighting with my head of engineering. My team is cranky. We have people problems, not product problems. And so early on, I saw this disconnect in what everyone wants you to be as a leader versus what you really need to be
Okay, so I
as a
want to go
leader.
even further back because this is
So that, yeah, that's
well,
my backpack
it's
story.
a interesting journey. So I'm already sensing a little bit of okay, you're learning about your customers, but there had to be a point
Yeah.
even back even further when you first became an independent consultant, when you first had to create your first customer back when
Yeah.
you don't even know, and I'm not sure I could remember the smart back myself, but when you I could remember because I remember going
Ah,
out
I
and
know.
saying,
I got
okay,
it. Who was your first customer
I
here?
remember was doing infographics for newspapers and
Mm.
that was my jobby job. And newspapers were just going down the tubes. They were just like, there was no future in newspapers. And that was clear to me. But I knew that people read the infographics, even though they weren't buying the newspaper, they liked the infographics. So I had a feeling, just a very stupid idea, honestly, that the newspapers able to afford to pay me a salary. Somehow they're making enough money plus to do that, plus make a profit. So why do I need the newspaper? I was like, so I didn't really have any idea except for I wanted to take infographics out of newspapers and into the world somehow. And actually thought my first thought was I was going to be making like a syndication service for, I don't know, I don't even know. But I remember, I do remember those early conversations. Just I remember talking to a guy at Anheuser-Busch. I lived in St. Louis, and I was like, we could explain how you make the beer. And I remember him saying, nobody cares how we make the beer. He wasn't my first customer, but it was like I think my first customer was a company called Digimark. They made
Oh
this
my
digital
God.
watermarking software, and it was really hard to explain. And um, so I was able to finally figure out where the sweet spot was, which was in technology, explaining complex technology to investors, to customers. That's where I eventually figured out who my customer was, but had to start. You have to start somewhere. You just have to start having those conversations when you don't actually know what's Donna as a
Yeah.
service look like. I'm
Yeah.
hoping to take you back there because I think that a lot of people are struggling with that. They're in their jobby job, they have their corporate, they're doing okay, but they're not feeling like they've they've they sense that there's more possibilities that they could be exploring and they just don't know how to begin. So I'm hoping I can get you back in your brain to that. Where did that start? That itch.
And it's funny, I can remember my first client, and I also remember how it turned into a jobby job.
Mm.
And so it's also reminding me of the fluidity of the economy that we
Yeah.
live in, the fluidity of gig economy to what's it? called portfolio economy to
Yeah.
jobs can be full time. They can turn into something else. But yeah, I do remember my first client now that you mention it.
So how did that, can you tell us the story? How that
Yeah. So it was now someone who's a good friend of mine, 25 years later, more than 25 years later. At the time, I was playing in rock bands and I had met this other band that we started playing shows with in New York. I'm from New York, but at the time I was in college in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so when I'd come back to New York, I'd hang out with this other band. We would play shows, and their drummer, my friend, now friend Jane, she at the time had this was in the late 90s, so they called it a multimedia company. And so I think it was a
that
little
takes
around the
me
same
back.
time that you were working at. So they made CD-ROMs, DVD-ROMs, and they were starting to move into websites. And I taught myself to code in my bedroom for fun. And so I saw what they were doing and I told them I wanted to work with them and I wanted to build websites for them or something. I didn't know what, but I think I was just like, let me help you. Let me do whatever you need done. And and that became my college part-time job. So during college, I worked for them. Actually, I guess I was ahead of my time. I worked remotely for them out of my dorm room on my Ethernet cable connection with my
Hmm.
computer. I ran a website for them called thedrummergirl.com, and that was so much fun, and I got to interview all these cool people like Yola Tango's drummer and the Magnetic Fields drummer, and it was so much fun, and we stayed friends ever since. But I've worked Jane, who ran that company, I've worked with her on and off for years in different capacities ever since. And yeah, that definitely inspired me to talk about creating the possible. In the late 90s, this whole website thing was like, you're doing what? Everyone thought
Well,
I was
then,
nuts. But
yeah, you use the word fluidity. I think that's a really interesting word. And I'm already hearing in the stories that you're telling that you are, Clayton Christensen in one of his books, maybe more than one, talks about the mix between deliberate and emergent strategy. That the idea is that as a company, but also as an individual, it helps to have a purpose, but it also is important to be open to opportunities that kind of show up along the way. And it sounds like I heard a couple things. I heard it's something that looked really interesting to you that you were curious about, that you wanted to learn about. So you leaned into that. Um, but then I also heard like when later on you're working as a product consultant, you're leaning into another kind of problem and you're like, well, okay, the problem that I'm here to solve is not the problem.
yeah, and
So it
I
sounds like
think
a very much a learn. You talk about the leader's journey, but it sounds a lot like a learning journey. It's for you. It's been a learning journey all the way.
I would say so. I'm going to bring up optimism again. When I look at it, I talk about this in the book a bit, which is if I look at my journey negatively for years, I thought I was a quitter, and that's this narrative I grew up with that I had been told to me by many people, including my parents. You always start something and then you quit, you never stick with it, and
Can't quit something you don't start. So if you're a quitter, you're also a starter.
Exactly, exactly. And it took me many years and tons of therapy and then eventually working with my own coach to realize, oh, wait, no, I'm just a really good strategist and I'm a good business person who sees problems and then pounces on them and then wants to solve them for the world. And yeah, early on, I saw this opportunity to find cool things at the time on the internet and compile them and share them with the world. And I did it for myself, but then when I found this company that was doing it in different ways, they were also producing material for Sloan Kettering, like all these multimedia stuff they were, I guess you could say, like trailblazers in the health tech space. So whatever it is, whether it's like rock and roll drumming information or health stuff, but finding it, compiling it, and repackaging it and sharing it with the world so that you could help people move forward. I was doing that then in the 90s. In hindsight, I could see that. I did that eventually in the product world. So I moved more into software development and apps. And it's the same idea when you're building software to help people do things. You have to go out and see what people are doing, see what's possible, see how you can improve it so that you can meet customer goals and so that you can meet customer goals and so that you can meet customer goals and business goals. And doing that for products was really fun. I would have kept doing it. But then when I was working in the book, I talk about this as one specific executive team that really kicked my butt. It was really several teams over and over again, but this one team really cemented it for me, which is when I saw that, okay, their products are fine, but the real challenge they're having is people challenges. And I had worked with coaches before and I knew the power of it. I was easily then able to shift from seeing what's possible in the world and reframing information and putting it in the form of websites or seeing what's possible in the world, reframing it and putting it in the form of software to now seeing what's possible with the leaders and teams I work with, reflecting it and letting them reframe it and them telling me what's possible with their leadership. It's all the same thing. And it's nice to
Yeah,
see
how
that.
would you describe that again? Because I think you are getting to I feel like you're answering that first question about what's your canvas, what's your palette.
Yep, I know I should be drawing it, but that's really hard for me to.
And there's something ethnographical about it. And
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
something like you're doing a lot of watching and listening, but you're not impartial. You have a sort of an intention there in your watching and you're observing and you're listening, right? You have a some kind of a purposeful thing that you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, there is that purpose there. So if I think about, okay, my first client, it was someone who ran a company and that person ended up becoming a friend. They were producing these newfangled weird multimedia things. And my thinking at the time was, I guess my only real thinking at the time was, I want to have a job when I grow up where I can wear jeans and have tattoos. So can I work for you, please? So I guess in reality, and can we play rock music at night and hang out? This
There you
is
go.
really
There you go.
so
Yeah.
I
Right.
know. I think that was really all that was going on there at the time. But what was behind that whole building websites thing was let me go out and find cool stuff and then share it with the world. And it was really as simple as that. So, like, my first ever website that I built in my bedroom in high school was an X-Files fan site.
Oh,
And
cool.
it was just let me go find things and then put them together and put that out there. And it was
Neat.
really fun. I met some cool people that way. And then there was drummergirl.com, and that was really fun. Let me just go interview people about being a drummer and put it back together and share it with the world. And eventually, while I was in college, I was actually studying to be a documentary filmmaker. So it's exactly what you just said, which is just let me look at the world and see what I see and then share it with the world and make something of it. And then moving into software development, same thing. Let's watch people and how they live their lives and let's build tools that help them do it even better. And now with executive coaching, same way. Let me tell you what I see, help you make sense of it, and let's do it even better so that you can even more fantastically meet your business goals and your life's goals with your business, ideally, but also your life's goals. So it is all the same thing. I think the canvas and the brush is maybe the canvas is optimism, the brush is curiosity.
I was going to say there's something about you're just really interested in stuff. And you also have you're developing or have developed this capability to synthesize it and reflect it back. or reflected outward. So it's Picasso said once that an artist is a collector who can't afford to buy the paintings, so they have to make them.
I love that. I think there's
If
I
you're
other.
like a collector of things, you're collecting all these things you're interested in, and you're finding ways to display your collection. And if the collection is a bunch of insights about people, like it sounds like they're, I don't want to tell, I shouldn't tell you, I should ask you the questions.
Sure.
But so it's, if there was a, if there were, I feel like I'm starting to understand your method a little bit. You have, whether it's intuitive or natural or something that is intentional, maybe a little bit of both. It feels like you're following the stuff that you're really interested in and curious about, and that generates energy for you. Like that creates energy for you to continue to do it. And in reflecting it back, you're finding ways to make those things, whatever they are, valuable to other people. So in the way that you're reflecting it back, you're creating value. And it's not dissimilar to what I got into infographics because I'm really interested in learning about things. And in order for me to learn about stuff, I have to draw a picture of it. And then with a little bit of extra work, that picture can be useful for other people. It's like finding a thing that I enjoy doing, but figuring out what the extra pieces are to it that allows you to actually put a price on it or a value to it.
Yeah, it's
It
very
sounds like
much
you're doing
that.
something like very much like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's being curious, collecting, seeing what. Okay, so with my business and my trajectory over the last several decades, then I have to see what sense I make of what I found, and then I have to see what I can do with it. There have been times when it's, oh, I'm turning this into a business, or I'm gonna go get a job doing this thing, working for someone else. And so all those pieces I have to do. What I love about working as an executive coach that I never quite found as a consultant is I get to do the first half, which is collecting, seeing, and then telling you what I see, but I don't have to make sense of it.
Mm,
I just need to make sure that sense is made. And so I tell you what I see. And so think of it like tennis. So if imagine like I'm always thinking of Serena Williams. You could imagine her coach watching her play and then saying, I guess this is before she retired, but you can imagine her coach watching her play and saying, hey, flicked your wrist the wrong way here and served the wrong way. You have to go do it this way. Like, she's gonna. I keep wanting to curse here. I'm gonna try to. I'll
you could,
stay.
it's okay.
Okay. You could imagine she'd be like, "Fuck off! Seriously, you do not tell Serena Williams how to
Right.
serve. She invented her own way to serve, and that's quite all right. Or how to do a backhand. Like she
Yeah.
got to do whatever she wanted to do. When she did it her way, she was at her best. And what I love about my job now is as a consultant, I used to still have to make recommendations and really tell you what to do, but as a coach, I just get to tell you what I see and invite you to make sense of it. And then you to tell me what your insights are and you to tell me what you want to do about it so that you can then take action and learn from it so that you can stay on track towards meeting your goals. And it's so cool. So I get to do all the things that I've always loved doing for decades, which is observing, being curious, and then observing, and then telling you what I see. But then I get to just sit back and so cheesy, but the coachy term is you hold the space, and then I
Yeah.
hold the space for you to
Oh,
make
that's great.
something of
You're
it.
like a magic
Nice.
mirror.
Yeah.
Um, Let me ask you some harder questions because I think there are things that everybody struggles with. I know I've struggled, you struggle. When it comes to going out on your own, creating customers, you have to put a price tag. You have to say, if you're going to have a customer, you have to have a price. And you have to, and then nobody wants to be like that person who's selling, always selling, pushing something on people that they don't want. And yet, you have to create a customer if you want to create those possibilities for yourself and for other people. How do you go about, how do you start thinking about, oh wow, what do I, What am I going to charge? How do I don't want to say sell myself, but how do I generate those customer conversations when it's like, especially when you have something that's very intangible and what the value proposition is. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to tell you what I see. That'll be $5,000, whatever.
Yeah, I know you're
Yeah.
laughing there, right? Yeah.
But like, how do you, I don't have the answer. And I'm not expecting you to have the answer, but would just love to chat through with you. How do you think about that? How do you recommend that people start thinking about that if they want to do this?
I have thought about this a lot, and I would say it's one of the hardest things about working for yourself and running your own business. And it's especially hard when the service that you sell is not easily quantifiable. And it's ultimately about the impact that you're selling and the results that you're selling,
Hmm.
which are quantifiable, but it's hard to remember to think about impact and results when you have a service based business.
Yeah.
And so, what I've learned over the years is that if I'm clear with the people with whom I work, if I'm clear on the business impact that we can have when they're able to level up their leadership effectively and more effectively lead their company forward, or even, like I said earlier, 9 out of 10, it's you're able to do it and we can make it happen. Every 1 out of 10, it turns out you're not cut out to be CEO, or you're really not executive material and this is not what you want, and you move on and you find someone else to take your role. That's extremely valuable to your business as well. And so even if you
And to
don't end up
you, and
leveling
to you as an
into,
individual.
oh my
Yeah.
God, then you have your life back because you actually
Yeah.
hated doing what you did. So 10 out of 10, there's huge ROI for your business to be working with a high impact, performance oriented coach or whatever your solution is. For other people, it could, I don't know. This is the solution space that I'm in,
Yeah.
but we have to think about the impact. If there's no impact and we can't measure it in terms of dollars and in terms of emotional impact, and possibly physical or health. A lot of times there's a huge physical impact to us doing great work, and you get
Mhm.
your body back and and your health back. If we can't qualify it, I haven't figured out a way to properly assess what a service like this should cost. And usually I end up not working with folks if there really isn't a business impact to us working together. And this is part of why I work primarily now with founders, CEOs, and executive teams, is because I want that loop to be there, or that arc to be complete with that business impact. And if the impact is just on you and you're a middle manager and you feel better after working together, I'm happy, but I'm not really satisfied because I want there to be a business impact. So that's how I figured out. I guess it's the closest I've gotten to what we might think of as more traditional value-based pricing, but I don't do it quite in that classic value way. But we have to situate the value in something big. Without that, so that's what I consider transformation. Like I'm in the transformation business, and we put a value on that transformation. Without that, it's just a transaction. That can be totally fine. Therapists work in a transactional model.
Right.
I've
There's
loved
so
working
much
with
per hour.
therapists.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Right.
huge value in that. And certain consultants work in a
Yeah.
transactional model. Even when I was as a consultant, sometimes I just worked hourly. It was just easier. And even as a coach early on, there were just times it's like, all right, so what each session costs. And it was a lot more relaxing at times to not be thinking about impact. But yeah, I like making impact. So I place the value accordingly. But man, it's been a journey. I think it's one of the hardest things. I've always dealt with as a consultant and now especially as a coach.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth. As an artist, I like a product. I like actually making something. So I have this desire to have something that I've created. I think it's just personal. I like to make things. But I can add some other thoughts to that. One is if you're lucky enough to have a choice of customers, then you can you're probably pricing too low if everyone's saying yes and you're working with people that you don't want to be working with.
Yes, there's that too,
And
which I've run into, yes, in the
like
past.
my friend Alex Osterwalder once said, I just price it based on how bad you want to do it or whether it's going to feel like work. And if the less you want to do it, the higher the price should be. That's one way to think about it. If you have that luxury of
Yes.
having choices. And then for another way, I think that can be useful to think about it is what makes something easy to buy. And it's not always the price tag, it's the packaging. If someone, let's just say something as simple as getting your car fixed. If someone says it's going to be $90 an hour plus parts and labor and you have no idea what that's going to cost, it might be better for just to someone to say it's going to be $750. Boom. That makes
Yep.
it easier for you to make a decision. It makes it easier for you to buy. And I think a lot of people are pricing based on, well, how long am I going to spend on this and but I think thinking about impact is really important. But I think there's also this emotional curve that people have to get over when they're not used to taking money from people.
Yes.
And I try and remind people, look, when you have a company job and a boss, you're in a contractual relationship with them. It's just that have you've basically delegated to them all the profit work. You're still selling yourself. You've just said, okay, so much per week is what I'm worth. It's not any different, really. It's just that when you start having conversations and start thinking about creating customers, you have to take, it's one of my mentors said to me once, you either learn how to sell or you're going to work for somebody who knows how to sell. Those are the two choices that you
Yes.
have. And he was a
Yes.
sales guy, as you can imagine. But he also said nothing happens till somebody sells something. And those were like very eye-opening to me. And nobody wants to think of themselves as a salesperson, but yet we buy things all day long. We go around and half our life is buying things. And yet nobody wants anyone to sell them anything. They want to be the one making those choices. I think, though, if you really examine it, even just going into a mall, right? As the buyer, you are able to make the choices only based on what other people have decided that they're willing to sell. So you think you're making choices, but it's the sellers who are creating the choices, not the buyers. That's why the Soviet Union, when it existed, was like the stores were so boring, is because nobody had anything they wanted to sell or cared to sell. So there's nothing to buy. So
I think
I guess what I'm saying
yeah.
is that the creativity, if you really want to be creative in creating more choices and options in the world, then selling is just a part of that. It's just part and parcel of that activity of being creative, creating choices, creating opportunities, creating choices for yourself and for other people. Is there transactions involved in that?
I think there are, and it's funny to think about it that way because on the one hand, I'd rather just give things away because I'm like you, I still make things and I just currently give them away, which people think I'm nuts for giving it away, but it's fine. But what's wild about running a service-based business is it I find the sales stuff so hard on the one hand. On the other hand, if I think about it the way you helped me frame it a few minutes ago, which is who was my first customer? Oh, it was someone who I just was curious about and wanted to know how I could help her. And then I did help her. And now we're good friends decades later, that it doesn't feel like work. And or feel like sales. And when I think about the clients I create these days, when it's at my best, it's just people I'm interested in and curious about and ideally inspired by. And I want to know what's amazing about their business, the way they're leading their teams, how are they growing their companies, and how are they showing up as the leader of that company, and are they having the impact that they want to and need to have to continue to grow their company, and are they doing it in a style that really lines up with their mission, their purpose, and themselves and how they want to live their lives. And when I can really be curious about that with people and fully explore, then client creation, it just feels like getting to know people better and being my best self. But man, is that hard to remember half the time. Because otherwise, then it just
Yeah.
feels, oh
Yeah.
God, sales.
I
So
think the way I think about it is every time anybody buys anything, there's someone on the other side of that transaction who had to sell something.
yep.
So, and if you think about the percentage of our life that is spent in figuring out where we spend our money, or where we spend a big chunk of our time figuring out how to accumulate money, and the other half of the time figuring out how to spend it. But if you think about the amount of time that you spend thinking about, okay, where is the best place for me to put my money? It's always there's somebody selling, even if it's renting you something, there's still somebody on the other side of that is created a service, or and that those choices are only available because someone is made it their job to do it. Whether it's a plumber coming to fix your boiler, or someone fixing your car, or the person who makes you coffee in the morning. If you go to the barista, everybody's making choices about how they want to spend their time and how they want to turn for whatever in whatever way their time into their income. And like when you make your choices, and that's why it's so important for people to think about how these, be thoughtful about where you put your money, because you're, and every time you spend money, you're enabling these choices to continue or to go obsolete.
Yeah, and I think you're making me want to ask you how you've done this, because you're someone who you built a successful service-based business and grew a company. It wasn't just you, and you had
Yeah. Yeah.
employees and clients. How did you build, I don't know if this is the right question, but build the confidence to, this all sounds great, but how did you really
Yeah.
build the ability to go in there and find companies and people you wanted to work with and sell them things?
I think it's very much like you fall in love with the problem. Fall in love. You don't have to have the answer necessarily to fall in love with the challenge or the problem. And for me, the thing that I fell in love with was the challenge or problem of taking really complex, confusing, impossible to understand, impossible to explain things and make them legible, help people get their alignment, and to bring my drawing skills, which I learned in art school, into a place where I felt like they were really useful, not like I was just making something to put on a wall to someone decide if it met their taste specifications or not, whether it went with their couch or whatever, but to actually be using those skills to solve real problems and to learn. For me, it was very exciting to learn how I always liked the more abstract, not abstract drawings, but I liked the abstract ideas, making them concrete. It was part of my learning, naturally part of my learning process. What does that look like? How would I draw? When I was in the newspaper business, it was like I always went over to the business section because they had the most, how do you draw a merger?
Yeah.
That's a fun. Okay, that's for me. That's much more fun than how do you draw the new stadium that they're building. That's boring.
Mm.
Let's just get the blueprints and draw. It's a lot of work, but it's not as interesting or satisfying to the curiosity as like how do you draw? How do you draw and how do you draw a roll-up strategy, let alone merger like acquisition and those kind of things just got really for me very interesting because if I could if I could draw it, I could understand it. And
Drawing
like
for
my, you
understanding.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's, I think, what for me has been eye-opening and liberating because whether I'm working with a multi-million dollar company or a billion dollar company, depending on who you are. If I'm working with like a big five, is it big five, big three? I've lost count, but the big
however
tech
many.
company executive comes to me. I'm not working with the CEO there. So they're some sort of high up executive level. But whether it's them or if I've worked with founder CEOs of multi-million dollar to billion dollar companies. And no matter what scale you're at, when you are not showing up and leading effectively, there is a huge, not just ROI to doing it better, but there's a huge cost to not showing up as who and what you need to be.
Yeah.
And so when we can quantify that, it puts it all into perspective. I've helped CEOs figure out $100 million, multi-$100 million problems where, oh my God, we're losing hundreds of millions of dollars each quarter because whatever I do, my team does the other thing. Like, so, and the reason in that case, it was not because he was saying the wrong things, it's because he had terrible relationships with his new executive hires and they didn't trust each other, and they were not getting along well. And yeah, I think when we can be fully curious about what the opportunities are or what the costs are, it does put it all into perspective. But man, I wish I just had a straight up cookie cutter product that I could sell. Just do it that way. Or even just a
Well, but even then, I
simple
mean,
price tag on my service or whatever. But
I have to say, Donna, I tried with we had this. I thought, oh, maybe make a software product, and I got some people together and we made a little startup. It was like a little garage band. Had a online whiteboard kind of product called Board Thing.
oh
But
yeah, I used to use it. Yep.
okay, one of the things I realized before I got too deep into that was, oh, when you create a software product, you can't just make a product and sell it and forget about it. You are getting on a treadmill
Oh yeah.
that is web standards, Apple app ecosystem, Microsoft app ecosystem, whatever, Android. You are getting on this treadmill that you're never going to be able to ever get off. And I was like, okay, that's not a that's not just a product that you have in a warehouse that you can sell. That's a service too. It's just a different kind of a service.
It is. And as a former product manager, I loved being on that. It didn't feel like a treadmill at the time.
Like a
I
workout.
loved being in-house. Yeah, I felt like a workout. I loved being in-house. And that was always a nice relaxing period from being an independent consultant when I'd go in-house for a couple of years. And
Mhm.
then I loved being immersed in it and really getting to know our customers and prioritization and all that. It was so much fun. But I know I was once removed from the success of the product because even though I owned the success of the product, I didn't own the company. And so it was a lot easier for me to swoop in, do product magic, and
Right.
help the company succeed. But if we failed, it was okay because I would just go get another job. When it's
Right.
you and your company and you're immersed in the everyday of being on this treadmill, or being in this thing, it can feel like a treadmill, and that could be maddening.
Let
So
me
yeah, I
ask you
hear.
a wrap-up question here.
Yeah.
If there's one habit in your life that you feel has been most generative in terms of creating possibilities for you, for your customers, for other people. What's the habit? What's the habit that people can cultivate that want to be more like you in this way?
It's so funny because what the answer I'm going to give you is one that I need to keep cultivating and that I need to remind myself that I have and to use more often, which is this habit of seeing cool people who inspire me and pique my curiosity, reaching out to them and having a conversation. And I'm thinking about this right now because we've
I'm
been
like,
talking about
yeah,
it,
like
but
maybe you were talking about whether you should do a podcast or not when we got
well,
first.
I know this is it's how we've met, or it's how we met many years ago. And I don't know if you remember, but I think I was probably thinking of writing my first book. And I was terrified because as I hate writing, but I felt like I had this book in me. And this was years ago. And I reached out to you and I was totally intimidated. Oh, Dave Gray, I can't just reach out to him and ask him for a chat. But I reached out to you for a chat and it was amazing. And you were so cool and so helpful. And we've stayed in touch ever
Yeah.
since. And
Well, that's
I think I
nice to
did it with the
know.
last book too. Yeah, but I forget that I could do that because I'm otherwise such an introverted little puppy dog who is intimidated by people. But
Well, what a wonderful
yeah,
habit, though. That's a great, and that's not a hard habit to cultivate, is it? Just like noticing people that you want to learn more about, that you're interested in, and just
it
reaching
shouldn't
out.
be. I'm thinking, how do I turn it into more of a habit? Because yeah, but I guess it feels intimidating even for me, and I do it. That's how we met. It works. And as I have a very fancy microphone, and you
Yeah.
might not know this, but I have in grad school, my secondary focus, primary was documentary filmmaking, and then my secondary focus was audio production. So I I have that interest. I have worked for NPR. I have all this. So it's yes, I can do this. I should do this.
Oh,
On
that's
my
a
not now list for this quarter, but maybe sometime soon.
that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a great habit for anybody, even if it's just reading books, but even better if you can reach out to people and kind of poke around in their brain for a little bit. And thank you for
Yeah.
letting me do that with you today. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for inspiring me yet again. I'm glad you reached out. This was so much fun.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on The Art of the Possible. To learn more and discover your best next step, come visit us at schoolofthepossible.com. See you next time. Okay, so now we have a little bit of time for after party.
Yeah. What a cool format. That was like just a really fun. Of course you would have that format. It was just a
I
cool
don't know if I
conversation.
don't, was it even a format?
What I like about it is that we just had a conversation. I guess that's what I'm thinking of format, maybe
Yeah,
non-format. We just let's see where this
unformat.
goes. You had
Yeah.
just a thread that was guiding you.
Just,
Yeah. You're reminding me of one of my mentors and instructors when I trained as a coach. It's the funniest thing. One day, he was a therapist by training and or therapist and coach, but mostly therapist. And he said something like, you could talk to a lamppost and feel better after an hour. There's just value in
that's
sometimes
true. Yeah.
and like just luckily coaching is a little more than that because if you just feel better every time we meet, then we need to do more than that. But there is value in just putting these things out into the world,
Well, but
whether
also
it's
there's the thing
or
of even as
products.
something, even if you go back, and this is like a super simple idea, but if you stop for donuts on your way to work, okay, you've just created a whole bunch of possibilities that were not there before you showed up at the front door with donuts. As soon as you show up at the front door with donuts, you have all the, okay, you could leave the donuts in the lobby. You can walk around. You could go to your favorite people first and give them the first choice of donut. You could go to the people that you
Yeah.
want something from and give them but none of those things would be possible if you didn't stop for donuts. You see what I'm saying? And you're for your clients, you're like the box of donuts that if they don't show, if they don't show up for you, then all these other seeds could never bloom. All these other things could never happen that would have that only it's only because they stop for donuts with you that they have this gift that they can bring to their coworkers. And if they didn't stop for donuts, not to say that you're like donut, but
No.
if they didn't, if they didn't stop for Donna,
Yes, it's
donuts,
yes.
whatever, then they wouldn't. Then all these things wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, yeah. You're reminding me, I'd love to get your thoughts on this thing, which
Okay.
is you're reminding me part of how I built my business, consultancy, and then now coaching business. Initially, all of my clients, I created them, but I mostly was through relationships, people I'd met in conference hallways and buses and airplanes, and there was a lot of serendipity for years where I'd meet people. So even you, I think we'd met probably in hallways before. That's part of where it was a lot easier for me
Yeah.
to reach out to you and say hi the first time. And without that, I'm trying to figure out this is my big project for this year, which is how do I expand? So I'm going to use your frame, which is possible. These are possibilities that I used to have lots of because I just had all these people at airports and conference hallways and whatever and panels.
Yeah.
Without that, I just want to meet
Also,
more people this year. I want to
yeah.
expand those possibilities. Yeah, it's I just want to meet people in general, but I do think about the business value of the conference hallways. It was always
Yeah.
make friends and then I could create clients just because I knew what was going on with people and I knew how to help them. This is always one of the things that inspired me about your work too. I love that, we met through UX communities, but neither of us have
Yeah.
ever been fully like, yes, we are UX people. And yeah, I love that you have been able to float around like that too. Cause
Well,
like right
that's a
now, most of
mutual
my
feeling.
clients are not UX
Yeah.
people. Very few UXers go start their own companies, but the few that have often become clients, but it doesn't
Isn't
happen.
that's a whole other topic, isn't it?
Oh my God, we could go on. But yes, definitely.
Awesome.
All
Well,
right.
thanks for making time for me, Donna. It was really great
Yeah.
to talk to you. I don't know what the schedule is. I'm like, it's the
Okay.
schedule is for the podcast is when I get around to it.
Cool. That sounds about right.
All
All
right.
right. Good to
Great to
see
see
you.
you.
Bye, Dave.